All right, I've gone into Lucid GTO and I've created a few drills to help me with my turn C betting concerns. So I do want to show you the setup briefly before I get started with playing the drills. The thing to recognize about a turn C bet drill is that it's dependent on what happened on the flop. So I can't simply, there's a couple of different ways that you could approach running these drills. My preference when I'm targeting specific nodes, so I'm targeting in position turn C bet, what I like to do is create a drill. So in this case, I'm going to go to my 120 big blind single raise pot script. And I want to create a drill that goes straight to the area of concern. So I want to play in position. I want to play only the turn. I could play until the end of the hand, but in this case, my preference is to play only till the end of the street. I have the sizes that I want already in the sim, so I'm okay with the default sizes on turn and river. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go directly down here to the node that I'm interested in. So I'm going to start the hand with check and either quarter pot, 3/4 pot, or 150% sizing. So I created 3 separate drills. I'll just show you, if we wanted quarter pot, call, turn, check. And now we're at the correct decision point. So we're starting from the turn C bet opportunity. We're skipping all of the previous steps here. And we're just going to get maximum repetitions of the turn C bet opportunity given the flop bet and the call. So I've already created these. I'm not going to save it right now. But you can see here, if I go to 120, that we've now got 3 turn C bet drills for flop B25, flop B75, and flop B150. The hard drive that I'm playing off of, I would love to be able to play all of them at once. I actually think that would be the best way to do this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a 2-tabling session, and I'll talk a little bit about why I'd like to do that. Okay, so here I've got 2 tables open. On the left, I've got B25 as the flop size. So you can see that the pot is 7.4 big blinds. On the right, I've got B75 as the flop size. So you can see 12.6 is the pot size. Now, Lucid is not going to filter for particular board textures in this environment. I could set up a drill where I'm only looking at B75, and then I filter for the types of boards that I would normally use B75. That is possible. But what I'm going to do for the purpose of this drill, or for this video, is I'm going to multi-table it to force myself to split attention between the different scenarios that happen on the flop. So I like doing this from time to time, and I would have even preferred doing 4 tables where I have 2 of them 25%, 175, 150. But like I said, the hard drive that I'm playing this off of was not cooperating with 4 tables of memory usage. So 2 tables will have to do for now. But the nice thing about playing in that environment is that you're constantly forced to think back to what happened on the flop before you make your turn decision, because we know that that's going to change the turn strategy that we're interested in using, right? We're more likely to choose overbets when the flop size was smaller. We're more likely to choose underbets when the flop size was bigger. So taking that extra second to process what happened on the previous street is going to be really good for your in-game thought process down the road. But if you set up a training drill that is a little bit too repetitive, a little bit too easy, then you don't exercise that muscle. So you allow yourself to just assume, oh, I know what spot I'm playing. I can autopilot. I can just try to memorize how to play turns. But what you're not training is your recognition of the situation that you're in. And this is actually a pretty common idea or concept in the creation of practice drills in sports. I believe it's called randomized process or randomized drill design, where you don't allow the athlete to recognize a fixed situation. They have to react first to the environment and then execute the drill. Very short example would be if you were shooting basketballs and you wanted to get better at shooting a mid-range jump shot, and you just stood still at an arbitrary point on the court and had a rack of basketballs next to you and took shot after shot after shot. you would get better at that drill very quickly because you're not changing the environment that you're shooting from. You're standing in a fixed location. You don't have to read the defense. You don't have to read where the basket is. You know exactly where the basket is. So you get better and better and better. These drills don't help you get better at basketball. They help you get better at shooting from that specific location on the court with no defender. What helps you get better at basketball would be to have a coach feeding you the ball to a random location with your back to the rim. So now you have to go get the ball, you have to turn around, you have to find the basket, and then you shoot. And you do this in a randomized way such that you can't read the environment before you get there. So the correlation that I'm making here is that by creating a little bit of chaos in your training environment, you're forcing yourself to read the situation. So chaos in the training environment can be a good thing if you're trying to improve your practical skills for reading the situation in game. So that is my spiel for why this is a good training method. Let's play some hands, shall we? So I'm going to play at not the fastest pace because we're just two tabling here. And I'm going to remind myself that the problem I identified in my database review was that the turn C bet is maybe too low, but my theory is that I'm missing bluffs specifically because my fold to turn check raise was far too low. So I'm going to emphasize a little bit finding bluffs, and I'm also perhaps going to emphasize finding small bets because I think that's going to help with just the frequency problem. So double paired seems like a situation for small bets to me. Queen high doesn't make so much sense to bet. And here we bet big on the flop, which means having blockers to the straight is going to be very useful here. And I think it's a 3/4 situation. So we're getting a repeat flop. This time we have value. I'm going to actually board pair. Yeah, I think it's a small bet situation. Let's see. Yeah, it all seems to be fine. Even checking was fine. But I'm trying to push my betting frequency a little bit higher, so I'm not going to worry about trying to find sneaky checks. I don't think this hand class ever bets. And this can definitely bet. I don't think we go bigger than 3/4 on paired boards. I think this is just a spot to go thin for value. Checking would also be fine. So here, I have an unnatural looking bluff combo. I think the 4 of spades is good, but the king of diamonds is bad. So I think betting this sometimes would be reasonable. Not super common. I'm just going to test my intuition for this combo being acceptable. This is an overbet turn because it is a blank. So we found a 10% frequency bet, 0 EV difference. So given what I said in advance of betting, I'm actually quite happy with the result here. And now we have a clear bet fold. Interesting check raise with the 8 blocker. And no removal on bluffs, I guess. So here, it's a high frequency betting situation. I like over bluffing these spots. It's hard to defend enough. The 9 of spades seems like a good blocker. The 5 of clubs is fine. Like, it's not great, but it's fine. Again, I'm just going to push my betting frequency here. I think this is an okay bluff. Oh, it's actually a pure bluff. So this could be something for me to take note of, a hand that I'm missing. So this to me looks, again, like a very low frequency bluff. It has those same properties, but it's lacking any good blockers. I don't have a spade. The queen is not great. I know I'm trying to push the betting frequency, but this is a hand I would very rarely bet here, and I'm supposed to bet it 80% of the time. So I'm clearly being too selective with these no equity combos. This hand is too strong, too weak to value bet, I believe. Although it's an interesting, I think this is a 3/4 spot because the top card paired. Normally on board pairs, after small flop bet, we consider another small bet. But I think the top card is okay to bet 3/4. Either way, this is a hand I would always check. Okay, so we could get away with betting. I mean, when the queen pairs, we can just go thinner for value, right? So here again, top card pairs. Monotone, I don't remember. I don't know if I even created a heuristic for board pair on monotone. It's such a rare spot. I'm not going to worry too much about it. I think my hand is a reasonable barrel And I think I would just always have 3/4 sizing on this texture. Nice. Again, this feels too thin. And okay, so quarter pot. I wasn't using quarter pot in my game plan, so I'm going to treat that as a pure check. This hand I would never be in this spot with. Having the 6 seems bad. Again, I'm just going to check. Okay, so that's not a good bluff. With a pair, I just don't bluff with pairs, generally speaking. It is an overbet spot, so having the 3 of diamonds could be a good card. I am curious to see if this ever bets. It does not. So the jack is going to be really useful here for continuing. The straight cards become really relevant. A spade would obviously be better, but this should help me increase my frequency of weak bluffs that end up folding to the check raise. That's good. Here we just have a 3 again. I'm going to check again. Now we have the spade. I'm going to bet it even more often. Try not to take infinite time always. I don't think I should be bluffing the pair. So for a no equity bluff, I think this one is quite poor. We block the low gutters that fold. We block the speculative spade floats that fold. Although it was a 3/4 pot flop bet, so the spade shouldn't be that bad. I'm actually not sure with this hand. I would normally check. Here we have an overbetting spot. Our hand is clearly strong enough for value, just pure overbet. Here we have another overbetting spot. I don't think we should be bluffing with pairs. Here we have maybe a 3/4 spot or maybe an overbet. We looked at how the overcard is not truly a blank on these triple low boards, and facing quarter pot on the flop, I think king high basically never folds this texture. Maybe king deuce folds. So my guess is I just want to realize equity. Oh, and it's a pure bet. That one's quite interesting. I'm going to remember this one because it surprises me. So here, when the board pairs, I believe it's a 75% spot. The 4 shouldn't connect with my opponent too much. Do I want to be betting 75% with all the 10s in my hand, or do I want to check? This is a hand I would check sometimes in practice. I don't think it's bad to bet, and I am trying to increase my betting frequency, but it's, so it's very rarely checking in this situation. And I guess I get to play the rest of the street where I just call here. We're definitely not shoving. The king, so like I said, this is a 3/4 spot. I think having the king, I could check, but I have the 4 also as backup. I think I should just be betting. Just get value now from like a bad 6 or a 7 that has no chance against me. King 5 as a low equity bluff. I don't love my blockers here. The 4 is going to be a 3/4 bet and not super high frequency. So this is a hand, again, I would mostly check. So here with the 4, I could go for thin value. The jack connects with my opponent a bit on the quarter pot flop. That's small enough that there's going to be some jack high floats, some like 3-card straight type floats for sure. It feels a little thin. We could bet. So that quarter pot is a sizing. Yeah, I'm supposed to be reminding myself of this quarter pot option. And that would have been a good option for that particular hand. Overbet situation, not my favorite type of bluff. This hand is just too strong, I think, on a paired board to be bluffing with. Okay, so if we use the big size, it's close. So I am finding there's a few hands that I am inclined not to bet because of their showdown ability, that are still fine to bet some of the time. We had that ace high hand earlier on the 7-6-3, and now king high on queen 4. This is an overbet situation. I don't hate betting with this hand. The 10 of spades is good. Having hearts is whatever. For quarter pot, actually, it's having hearts is not great. Again, just feels like too strong of a hand. I guess I'll maybe, yeah, okay, that's fine. So after quarter pot, that hand has a lot more showdown value. This is a straight completer, although not a terrible one. I think 3/4 and overbet would both be reasonable here. These blockers seem like they want to bet extremely often. I think because only one particular straight completed, I think we just overbet a lot here. Okay, so it's 3/4. There's no need, by the way, to be this precise, I guess, with bet sizing choice. Like, as long as we recognize it's a big betting situation, I don't care too much which one you pick. As long as you're not like arbitrarily switching between them, where you bet small sometimes in the same spot and bet big other times, that would be less good. And here with diamonds, seems like a fairly strong bluff candidate. I don't think we get check raised much at all on this texture, so I'm okay using a flush draw. Pretty pure. This also just seems like this is a high barrel situation, and I have two reasonable blockers. I guess I could have switched to the 3/4 because it already told me that 3/4 was the better size, but oh well. Ace Jack looks viable for thin value, but on 10 high, it's probably a little too ambitious. And 7/5, yeah, I mean, I can get better gut shots to fold. I went 3/4 on the flop, which means spade floats are not as common, but they're still there, like ace of spades X. I could go kind of either way on this, but I would treat this as a blank. I would treat this as an overbet spot because of the large flop size. The king is not that problematic for my jack X or my pocket queens. Actually, it might be a 75%. Either way, we're just going to push the betting volume here. So pure check with that hand. I think I might just interfere too much with the hands that are folding when I have that combo. But the problem is that logic has led me to be a little bit too passive in these situations in the past. Same with this. Like I'm occasionally spotting these opportunities where playing my hand slower because of equity preservation would be good. But in other situations, that was holding back my betting frequency. So I think that's a mistake I'm just going to have to continue to make for a while. And that's okay until I hit the right level of aggression in these situations. But actually, it's been these like trashier bluff hands. Because again, this is a hand I would just check. And here it's, 12% of the time. This is an opportunity for that small bet that I missed before. And again, with the small flop bet size, I think it's even better because of the number of floats that are going to miss this turn card. Now, I don't think it's mandatory to continue this hand facing a check raise. I block a common bluff, and I'm extremely dead when I'm behind. I think this is okay to just bet fold. So I didn't hit frequencies really with that hand, but I lost no EV whatsoever. And I played in a way that is favorable to correct the tendencies that I've had with my frequencies. So this seems like, just a high frequency barrel card with the better quality bluffs that I have. Seems correct. Here again, we have a chance to, honestly, I just think this is a good play. And it's going to be more challenging to play this hand versus check raise. I don't know if that's a reason to not bet. Seems like it is not a reason to not bet. And I'm also forcing calls from queen 10 high, which is pretty crazy. So this one strikes me as a better bluff candidate. What I'm liking about this is that I have a powerful blocker with the 10 of spades. And On a king, I should be able to clear out just any 9 or any 4 pretty easily. But I also have like the 6 of hearts, which is mostly going to interact with the ace and not any like bad floats. So I think this is a hand that gets to bet sometimes. So this is the first substantial EV mistake we've seen. I'm pretty okay with making some EV mistakes in general when it's the aggressive kind of mistake. But I'm going to use that as a chance to pause play and take a look at the strategy in some of these spots. So it does seem there is a slight concern that I have that in this exact hand that we just played, the flop bet size is not a common one in the original flop strategy, which means we're getting to the turn with probably a lower accuracy solution. That said, this entire set of hands here is doing quite a lot of checking, and a lot of the low equity bluffs are coming from Queen X combinations and a little bit of like double low card combinations. So I do wonder if there's a tangible like takeaway from this. Just also looking at, even just trash high-low combinations. These are not all spades. And a surprising amount of 4x, actually, which I thought was going to be quite rare. So, I mean, we are seeing a convergence of like 2 big bets in a row. That's going to allow us to bluff with stronger hands. Also seeing a lot of strong Broadway gut shots being used as bluffs here. So I'm just going to look quickly at the response to figure out what is so problematic. Certainly could be that 10 is much more of a negative blocker than I thought. We're seeing a lot of hands that have the 10 folding turn. And that's the type of, this is the offsuit region right here. And the offsuit region that peels the flop very often has the 10 of spades, the jack of spades, the queen of spades. Actually, that's almost certainly going to be the reason. Offsuit hands drive the action in a lot of strategies, and when you're trying to distinguish between blockers in a wide range situation, you need to try and figure out the impact that a single card could have on a pretty large grouping of hands. So that queen of spades is like an okay-ish. It's not even. It's very often using like the other queen highs. But this jack of spades or this 10 of spades just basically never betting the turn. So that's interesting. It's hard, again, to take away something tangible from recognizing like, the 10 of spades is actually a bad blocker here rather than a good one. But what I would come back to is that idea of like trying to avoid the floats, trying to avoid the low equity floats that have to fold. This is a very common rule of thumb that I recommend to my students for figuring out turn barrels. You don't want to interfere with the lighter flop calls. And after a big bet on the flop, I kind of just thought, there's not that many light flop calls. I'm mostly targeting 9x and 4x. But the sim was showing me there that, there's queen 10, there's jack 10. And these hands are all folding the turn. Even king 10 is folding the turn. So a lot of the floats on the flop were offsuit hands that had 2 overs to the 9, or offsuit hands that hit the 9. And that interferes with these cards pretty frequently. So that certainly makes sense to me. And I think that's a slightly inaccurate read that I made on the blocker effect here. It's actually the only big EV BB mistake that I made in the session, which makes me happy about the quality of my turn barreling in general. Although I do think this is a spot that I could continue to improve at. It seemed that a lot of the errors I was making were frequency mistakes, not EV mistakes. So that is promising. This is the other one that I was a little unsure about. I believe I was told this hand was a pure check. And again, I think it's going to come down to where the high frequency folds. So after a big bet on the flop, we're not seeing many light floats at all. The only light floats I'm guessing are going to be wrapped around the jack in some way. So if I unweight, or if I weight this, we can see some like ace 9 with a spade, ace 10 with a spade, ace of spades 7. Yeah, so ace of spades is going to be probably a bad bluff card, would be my guess, just because there's so many automatic folds here from ace of spades. But there's also a lot of the gutters around the jack and the 8, and the gutters around the 8 and the 4. So all the low gutters are just pure folds. Even the low flush draws, interestingly enough, are pure folds. So I think that is going to determine, for this bet sizing sequence, why we don't want to have a low gut shot when we're bluffing. Most likely, we just want to have. Yeah, it's funny that it's okay with using the ace of spades, but it's actually using a lot of ace high hands that don't have the ace of spades. And then it's going to be using, again, those like queen X hands, loving just being out of the way of the gut shot entirely. So you can see having just like a 3 or a deuce in your hand is really powerful. Having a 3 or a deuce means you don't block any of the gut shots. You only block top pair potential. So that is kind of the structure that I was expecting. But for whatever reason, I don't know, still just got kind of roped into betting my gut shot just because I thought it was a high barrel spot. And it is. I mean, it's a 55% barrel situation with large sizings. That's a pretty aggressive strategy in general. So I think it's a reasonable one. So this is how I would go about my training for looking at individual turn spots. That's going to be, I think, all for the turn c-bet game planning. And I'll see you in the next one.